In a courtroom erupts as a black woman in a green suit is attacked. Her badge reveals she's the new chief. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for our latest videos. The courtroom was a cauldron of fury, its walls vibrating with the roars of a packed gallery, protesters' fists pounding benches, their chants of justice for Jamal clashing with the prosecutor's icy accusations, while Judge Harlan's gavel slammed like a gunshot. Failing to tame the chaos, and Olivia Grant, her green suit a defiant slash of color in the seething crowd, shoved through the throng toward the defense table, her pulse a war drum because the young black defendant, Jamal, barely 19, was being crushed by a system she'd vowed to dismantle. And though her role as the city's new police chief remained a guarded secret, Olivia couldn't stand idle. Not when a boy's life hung on lies. Her 20 years of battling corruption from Chicago's blood-soaked streets to precinct backrooms screaming for action. The air crackled with rage, reporters' cameras swiveling, their live streams beaming the trial's fever to the world. And Olivia, her badge tucked in her jacket, leaned toward the harried public defender, her voice a low blade. His arrest reports fabricated "Get me the officer's log," but her presence, a black woman in a tailored suit moving with unshakable purpose, was a lightning rod. And Carl Dempsey, a white officer with a buzz cut and eyes burning with contempt, zeroed in, his hand gripping his baton, his shout slicing through the din. "You step back!" Now the crowd surged, a woman screaming, "Pig!" at Dempsey, a bottle shattering against the wall, and Olivia raised her hands, her voice calm but iron. "I'm with the defense, officer." But Dempsey's face twisted, his prejudice a reflex black. Confident, defiant, and he charged, his baton arcing, his other hand slamming her shoulder, hurling her to the hardwood floor with a bone-rattling thud. Pain exploding in her chest as the courtroom erupted, protesters lunging forward, bailiffs scrambling, cameras flashing like strobe lights, the live streams capturing every brutal second. And Olivia, her breath jagged, felt the city's pulse stop. Because this wasn't just an assault, it was a match struck in a room soaked with gasoline. Her ribs screamed, but her training, decades of dodging bullets, outwitting bigots, climbing to chief against all odds, roared louder. And she rose, her green suit torn at the sleeve, her eyes locked on Dempsey's, his sneer faltering as the crowd's shouts turned to a unified howl. "Who is she?" She reached into her jacket, not for the pepper spray she'd carried as a rookie, but for the gold badge that gleamed like a guillotine. Her voice a thunderclap that silenced the room. "I'm Olivia Grant, Chief of Police, and you, Officer Dempsey, are under arrest for assaulting your commanding officer." The courtroom imploded, a collective gasp morphing into chaos, protesters cheering, reporters shoving mics forward. Dempsey's face collapsing into panic, his baton frozen midair, his stammered chief swallowed by the crowd's roar. And Judge Harlan, his face ashen, banged his gavel, shouting, "Order, order." But the room was a beast unleashed, bailiffs hesitating, their eyes darting between Dempsey and Olivia, her badge a blazing truth that rewrote the scene. Olivia stepped forward, her ribs aching but her posture a steel column, her voice cutting through the madness. "Bailiffs, cuff him now, and I want a full investigation into Officer Dempsey's record. Effective immediately." The command was a whip, and the bailiffs moved, snapping cuffs on Dempsey's wrists, his protests. "This is a mistake," drowned by the crowd's chants. "Lock him up," and the camera's relentless clicks. X already exploding with hashtags like #Chief Grant Takedown and #Courtroom Justice. The video racking up millions of views in minutes. Olivia felt the room's weight shift, her secret identity now a public weapon, but also a target, because she saw the other officers in the corner, their faces dark with the resentment, one whispering to another, their loyalty to Dempsey a warning of the rot she'd been hired to purge. The judge's voice cracked. "Chief Grant, this court is adjourned." But the chaos spilled outward, reporters mobbing her, a mic jabbing her cheek, a shouted question. "Is this your first act as chief?" And Olivia, her eyes sweeping the room, Jamal's grateful nod, a flicker of hope. answered, "This is the start. No one's above the law. Not in my city." The words were a vow, a challenge. But as she pushed toward the exit, Dempsey's cuffed glare burned into her. His hissed, "You're dead for this," a venomous promise. And Olivia felt the storm gathering, the force's old guards circling, the media amplifying every heartbeat. Her phone buzzed with alerts mayor's office, union reps, her deputy, but she ignored them. Stepping into the courthouse's marble hall, the city's skyline a battleground beyond the doors. Because this wasn't the debut she'd planned, but a declaration of war. And Olivia Grant, the chief nobody saw coming, was ready to tear the system apart, starting with the men who thought they could bury her. The city was a tinderbox, its streets humming with the aftershocks of Olivia Grant's courtroom bombshell. Her green suit and gold idea, now iconic as the viral video of her arresting Carl Dempsey, looped endlessly on X, racking up tens of millions of views. The hashtags #ChiefGrant takedown and #courtroom justice splitting the public into warring camps. And Olivia, standing in her temporary office at police headquarters, felt the weight of her new role as chief of police like a storm cloud, her ribs still aching from Dempsey's baton, her mind racing because the world was watching, and the force she'd been hired to reform was already baring its teeth. Their resentment a low growl she could feel through the precinct's walls. The office was a fortress of chaos, phones ringing off the hook, aides rushing with reports, a TV blaring CNN's coverage of the courthouse clash, the anchor's voice dissecting her every move. Olivia Grant, the unannounced chief, has ignited a firestorm, hero or tyrant in Olivia. Her green suit swapped for a crisp navy blazer, stood before a mirror, adjusting her badge, her dark eyes burning with the fire of a woman who'd clawed her way from Chicago's roughest beats to this moment, but also with the dread of knowing that one misstep could turn the city's hope into hate. The video had done more than expose Dempsey's prejudice. It had cracked open the city's wounds, racial tension, police brutality, a justice system teetering on collapse in Olivia, who'd spent 20 years dodging bullets and bigots to earn this badge, knew the press conference she'd scheduled for noon was no mere formality. It was a battlefield, a chance to seize control of the narrative or lose the city to chaos. Her deputy, Lieutenant Maria Torres, burst in, her face grim, handing over a tablet with ex-post half-hailed Olivia as a savior. The other half branded her a traitor, with one anonymous account, Blue Line Forever, posting, "Grant's a plant, watch her bleed." The threat sent a chill down Olivia's spine, not because she feared for herself she'd faced worse in gang wars and precinct politics, but because it screamed of an inside job. A faction within the force loyal to Dempsey, men who saw her as an outsider, a black woman daring to wield power over their brotherhood. And Olivia's gut twisted, her Lagos-born mother's voice echoing in her mind, "Never let them see you flinch." A mantra that had carried her through every fight, but now felt like a lifeline in a city ready to burn. The press conference loomed. City Hall's steps swarmed with reporters, protesters, and cops in uniform, their eyes a mix of awe and defiance. And Olivia stepped to the podium, the wind whipping her blazer, the cameras a firing squad, her voice steady as she began. "I'm Olivia Grant, your chief of police, and I'm here to rebuild trust. No officer is above the law," starting with Carl Dempsey, who's suspended pending a full investigation. The crowd roared, some cheering, others booing, a protester waving a "Justice for Jamal" sign, and Olivia pressed on, her words ablade. "This department will root out corruption, end brutality, and serve every citizen. No exceptions. My reforms start today, with body cams mandatory, misconduct hearings public, and a civilian oversight board by month's end." The announcement was a grenade, reporters shouting questions. What about the union? Is Dempsey the only target? And Olivia held her ground, her gaze sweeping the crowd, catching a cluster of officers in the back, their arms crossed, their whispers a dark current. One of them, a burly sergeant, spitting on the ground, his eyes locked on hers, a challenge she couldn't ignore. The conference ended in a blur. But the threats didn't. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. No sender ID, step down, or your family pays. Olivia's blood ran cold, her sister and nephew in Atlanta flashing in her mind, the only softness in a life hardened by duty, and she forwarded the message to Torres, ordering a trace, her voice low. Find who sent this, and check every officer who worked with Dempsey. Someone's organizing. Torres nodded, but her hesitation spoke volumes, a flicker of doubt that cut Olivia deeper than the threat. Because even her deputy, a woman she'd trusted, seemed to waver under the force's old guard, a brotherhood that had ruled for decades, their loyalty not to the badge, but to each other. Back at headquarters, Olivia locked herself in her office, the TV now showing clips of the conference, pundits debating her reforms. A viral meme of her badge reveal captioned Chief Slay, but the anonymous threats kept coming. Another message pinging, you can't clean us out, we're the law. Her jaw clenched, her fingers tracing the badge, its weight a reminder of every fight: her mother's death to cancer, her brother lost to gang violence, her own battles against precinct racism, and she knew this wasn't just about Dempsey or the video, it was about a system that thrived on fear, and she just declared war on it. Torres knocked, her face tense. The union's pushing back, they're calling your reforms a witch hunt, and Dempsey's got a lawyer claiming entrapment. Olivia's eyes narrowed, her voice a whip. Let them sue, I want his personnel file. Every complaint, every cover-up, and I want it public. Torres hesitated again, and Olivia caught it, her heart sinking, because even her allies were faltering. And the sergeant's spit, the officer's glares, the threats piling up painted a truth: the force was a hydra, and she'd only cut one head. Her phone buzzed again. A news alert: Jamal's charges dropped. A small win, his mother's tearful thank you on TV, a flicker of light. But Olivia felt the darkness closing, the city divided, the force plotting, her family at risk. She stood, her blazer straight, her badge gleaming, and stepped toward the precinct's bullpen, where officers watched her like wolves, her voice ringing. Anyone who thinks they're untouchable, test me, reforms are coming, and I'm not backing down. The room stilled, her words a gauntlet, but the sergeant smirked, his radio crackling, and Olivia knew the fight was just beginning. The media storm a spark, the threats a fuse, and her city a battlefield she'd either save or lose. The precinct was a fortress of shadows, its fluorescent lights casting harsh lines across the bullpen where officers whispered in tight clusters, their eyes darting toward Olivia Grant's office, where she stood behind her desk, her navy blazer crisp despite the sleepless night, her badge a gleaming weight on her chest as she pored over Carl Dempsey's personnel file, her heart pounding with the fire of a woman who'd declared war on a corrupt system, but also with the dread of knowing the force she led was a coiled snake, ready to strike. Because the viral courtroom video and her press conference had lit a fuse, and now, with anonymous threats piling up and the city split, Olivia, the untested chief of police, was walking a razor's edge, her every move a test of whether she'd save her city or burn it down. The file was a grim map of Dempsey's career: 20 years, multiple brutality complaints dismissed, connections to a clique of veteran cops known for handling tough cases. Their names flagged in her Deputy Torres' initial report, and Olivia's gut churned. Because this wasn't just one bad apple, it was a network, a brotherhood that thrived in the precinct's underbelly. And Dempsey, now suspended and facing assault charges, was their martyr, his arrest a wound they'd avenge. The TV in the corner looped clips of her press conference, her words, "No officer is above the law now," a rallying cry for protesters outside, their justice for Jamal signs clashing with counter-demonstrators waving Blue Lives Matter flags, and Olivia felt the city's pulse, fractured and feverish, her reforms a beacon for some, a betrayal for others, and the anonymous message from last night, "Step down, or your family pays," burned in her mind, her sister and nephew in Atlanta, a vulnerability she couldn't ignore. Torres knocked, her face taut, handing over a USB drive. Dempsey's dashcam footage from the past year. There's patterns: chief, excessive force, mostly against Black and Latino kids. Olivia plugged it in, the grainy video showing Dempsey's smirk as he slammed a teen against a squad car, her jaw clenching because this was the rot she'd been hired to purge, but also a spark that could ignite the force against her. And Torres's hesitation, her eyes avoiding Olivia's, hinted at a deeper rift, a loyalty to the old guard that made Olivia's skin prickle, because even her deputy, handpicked for reform, might not be fully hers. The investigation was her weapon, and she'd wield it like a blade. She ordered a deep dive into Dempsey's associates, pulling records on Sergeant Mike Rollins, the burly cop who'd spat at her press conference, and his crew. Their disciplinary files suspiciously clean, a red flag that screamed cover-ups, and Olivia's mind raced, cross-referencing with Jamal's arrest report, spotting Rollins' signature as the supervising officer, a thread tying Dempsey's clique to systemic abuse. But the precinct wasn't safe. She felt the officers' stares through her office glass, their radios crackling with coded chatter. And when she left for the day, her unmarked sedan trailing through the city's dusk, a new threat emerged. Her phone buzzed with a photo from an unknown number. Her Atlanta sister's house, its front window shattered, a brick on the lawn scrawled with "Back off, Chief." Olivia's blood ran cold, her hands gripping the wheel. Because this wasn't a random act, it was a message, likely from inside the force, someone with access to her personnel file, her family's address, and the precision of it screamed Rollins or his allies, a retaliation for her probe into Dempsey. She called Atlanta PD, securing her sister's safety, but the attack was a gut punch, a reminder that her war wasn't just professional, it was personal, and the force knew how to hit where it hurt. Back at her apartment, a Spartan loft she'd barely settled into, Olivia fortified her resolve. Her mother's voice, "Never let them see you flinch," a shield as she pored over Rollins's file, finding links to a shady informant network, payments buried in budget reports. A hint that Dempsey's clique wasn't just brutal, they were on someone's payroll, protecting interests darker than street crime. Her phone buzzed again. Torres reporting, Rollins and his guys were seen at a bar last night, talking about taking care of the problem. I'm digging. But the union's circling. Chief, they're calling your investigation a vendetta. Olivia's eyes narrowed, her voice a low growl. Get me their financials. Maria. And don't tip them off if they're dirty. I want them buried. But Torres's pause, a fraction too long, was a crack in her trust. And Olivia felt the isolation of her role, a Black woman leading a force that half resented her, the city's cheers drowned by the precinct's snarls. The TV flickered with breaking news: protesters clashing with police downtown, a Molotov cocktail shattering near a squad car, the anchor blaming tensions from Chief Grant's reforms. And Olivia's heart sank, because every step forward seemed to pull the city apart. Her investigation, a spark in a powder keg. She stood, her badge heavy, and headed to the precinct's evidence room, pulling Dempsey's case files herself, her fingers trembling as she found a memo, initialed by Rollins, dismissing a brutality complaint with a single line: no further action. It was a match to the fire, proof of a cover-up, but also a target on her back, because Rollins's crew was watching, their radios alive with plans she couldn't hear. Olivia locked the memo in her safe, her phone pinging with another threat. You're digging your grave, Grant. She stared out at the city, its skyline a battlefield, and vowed to keep digging. Because Dempsey was just the start, and the force's rot ran deeper than she'd feared, a conspiracy she'd rip open, even if it cost her everything. The precinct's air was thick with defiance, a low hum of radios and whispered conspiracies snaking through the bullpen as Olivia Grant stood at her office window. Her navy blazer a stark contrast to the chaos beyond, her badge a heavy anchor as she braced for the fallout of her latest move, her heart pounding with the resolve of a woman who'd stared down corruption from Chicago's bloodiest corners to this fractured city, but also with the gnawing fear that the force she led was splintering, its loyalty torn between her reforms and the old guard's venom. Because the investigation into Carl Dempsey had peeled back a layer of rot Sergeant Mike Rollins and his clique, a brotherhood shielding brutality and crime. Their defiance now a public wound after Olivia's announcement to purge the department, a decision that had turned the city into a battlefield and her into a target. The TV blared breaking news, a sea of officers in uniform marching outside City Hall, their signs reading, "Support our Blue and Grants vendetta." Rollins at the helm, his burly frame and snarling voice rallying the crowd, calling her reforms a betrayal of the badge, and Olivia's jaw clenched. Because this wasn't just a protest, it was a declaration of war, a signal that Rollins's faction, emboldened by Dempsey's arrest and the viral courtroom video, was ready to fight. Their loyalty not to the city, but to a code that had festered for decades. Her desk was buried in reports Dempsey's dashcam footage, Rollins's scrubbed disciplinary files, a memo tying their clique to a drug trafficker's dropped case, and Olivia's mind raced. The evidence painting a grim truth: Rollins's group wasn't just covering butt brutality, they were on the payroll of a criminal network, protecting dealers and smugglers in exchange for cash, a betrayal that made her blood boil. Her mother's voice, "Never let them see you flinch," a fire in her veins as she prepared to face the city again. The mayor had called, his voice tense. "Olivia, you're splitting the force, slow down." But she'd hung up. Her focus on a press release she'd issued at dawn: immediate dismissal of any officer with verified misconduct, mandatory body cams, and a public database of complaints. Policies that had sparked cheers from protesters chanting, "Justice for Jamal," but also fueled the officers' march, their anger a tide threatening to drown her. Her deputy, Lieutenant Maria Torres, knocked, her face pale. "Chief, we've got a problem. Rollins's protest is turning ugly, and someone leaked your home address to X." Olivia's stomach lurched, the memory of her sister's shattered window in Atlanta flashing, the brick's message, "Back off," Chief A wound that hadn't healed, and now her own loft, her sanctuary, was exposed, the leak screaming of a traitor. Someone close, maybe even Torres, whose hesitations had grown too frequent, her eyes dodging Olivia's when pressed about Rollins's crew. The precinct felt like a trap. Officers' glares burning through her office glass, their radios alive with chatter she couldn't trust. And Olivia's phone buzzed with a new threat, a distorted voice message. "You're done, Brea. Grant, resign or we'll bury you." Her pulse roared, but fear was a luxury she'd never afford. She called a briefing, striding into the bullpen, her voice a blade. "Anyone protecting criminals, you're out. My reforms aren't negotiable. And if you're with Rollins, you're on the wrong side." The room stilled, some officers nodding, others smirking. Rollins's allies glaring, and Olivia felt the divide, a chasm splitting the force, her badge a shield but also a target. The protest outside escalated, sirens wailing as bottles flew, a squad car's window smashed, and Olivia, against Torres's pleas, drove to City Hall, her unmarked sedan weaving through a city on edge, her eyes scanning for threats. Because Rollins's march wasn't just a show, it was a cover, a distraction, and her gut screamed that something bigger was brewing. At City Hall, she faced the press again, cameras flashing, reporters shouting. "Chief Grant, are you targeting the entire force?" And Olivia, her blazer straight, her ribs still aching from Dempsey's baton, leaned into the mic. "I'm targeting corruption. Rollins and his crew are shielding criminals, and I've got the evidence to prove it." The crowd gasped, protesters cheering, officers booing, and Olivia held up a redacted memo, its text linking Rollins to a trafficker's case, her voice rising. "This ends now. No more cover-ups, no more brotherhood above the law." The move was a gamble, outing Rollins publicly, but it landed, the crowd erupting, X lighting up with #Chief Grant exposes, though Rollins, in the mob, roared back, "She's lying, she's tearing us apart," and Olivia saw his allies slip away, their radios crackling, their retreat too coordinated, a sign they were regrouping, planning. As she left the podium, a rock sailed from the crowd, grazing her temple, blood trickling, and Torres rushed to her side, but Olivia waved her off, her eyes locking on a figure in the shadows, a cop from Rollins's crew. His phone out, filming, and her heart sank, because the leak, the threats, the rock, all pointed to a traitor in her ranks, someone feeding Rollins's rebellion. Back at the precinct, she locked herself in her office, her temple bandaged, her hands shaking as she reviewed the memo's details, a payment trail to a shell company, a name tied to a city official, and Olivia realized the rot wasn't just in the force, it reached higher, a conspiracy that could crush her reforms. Torres reported, Rollins's crew is meeting tonight off the grid. No radios, and Olivia's voice was steel. Tail them, Maria, and get me their comms, I want names. But Torres' nod was too quick, her loyalty a question mark, and Olivia felt the walls closing, the city fracturing, the force dividing, her family at risk. The TV showed riots downtown, a protester's sign reading Grant or nothing, and Olivia stood, her badge gleaming, her mother's fire burning, because Rollins's protest was a spark, the traitor's leak a fuse, and her city was a powder keg she'd either light it for justice or watch it burn. The city was a furnace, its streets choked with the smoke of burning tires and the wail of sirens. The fallout of Olivia Grant's war on corruption, turning neighborhoods into battlegrounds. And inside the precinct, she stood like a general in her navy blazer, her badge a defiant beacon as she pored over a decrypted ledger, her heart thundering with the fire of a woman who'd survived Chicago's gang wars and precinct bigotry to become chief of police, but also with the dread that her reforms were tearing the city apart. Because the protests led by Sergeant Mike Rollins had ignited riots, and the memo she'd exposed linking his crew to a drug trafficker had peeled back a conspiracy that reached beyond the force, its threads snaking into City Hall. And Olivia, her ribs still bruised from Carl Dempsey's baton, her temples scarred from the rock at her press conference, knew she was no longer just fighting rogue cops, she was hunting a beast with claws in the city's heart. The ledger, pulled from a seized laptop tied to Rollins's informant network, was a goldmine-coded payments to a shell company, Blue Haven LLC, funneled through a city budget line, signed off by Councilman Victor Tate, a silver-haired politico with a mayoral campaign and a smile that hid venom. And Olivia's gut churned, because Tate wasn't just a bureaucrat, he was the puppet master, shielding Rollins's clique to protect a drug pipeline, his influence explaining the scrubbed complaints, the dropped cases, the cash in Dempsey's crew's pockets. Her office was a war room, monitors flashing ex-posts, how did Chief Grant, exposes trending alongside, cops under siege, protesters clashing with riot police downtown. A squad car torched and Olivia felt the city's pulse, fractured and furious. Her reforms a spark that had set it ablaze. The anonymous threats piling up. The latest a photo of her loft's door. Spray-painted traitor, a violation that screamed inside job. Her deputy Maria Torres's hesitations now a glaring red flag, because someone in her circle was feeding Rollins. And Olivia's trust, already battered by her sister's shattered window in Atlanta, was a fraying thread. Torres burst in, her face tight. Chief, we've got a lead. Blue Haven's linked to a warehouse in the docks. Rollins's crew's been spotted there. Moving product. Olivia's eyes narrowed, her voice steel. Get a tactical team. Maria, no leaks, no radios, we hit it tonight. But Torres's pause, a flicker of unease, cut deeper than the threats, and Olivia's heart sank, because her deputy, her supposed ally, was either compromised or afraid, and neither was acceptable when the city was bleeding. The raid was her gambit, a chance to gut Rollins's operation and expose Tate, and she spent the day planning, pulling loyal officers handpicked from the precinct's younger ranks, untainted by the old guard briefing them in a secure room. Her voice a blade. We're taking down a cancer, Rollins, his crew, their backers, no hesitation, no mercy. Dusk fell, the city a cauldron of unrest, and Olivia led the raid herself, her tactical vest snug, her pistol a cold weight. The docks a maze of rusted cranes and shadowed crates. The warehouse pulsing with the hum of illicit deals. Her team moving like ghosts, breaching the doors with a flashbang's roar. Shouts and gunfire erupting as Rollins's men scrambled. Their drugs, kilos of white powder stacked in plain sight. Olivia spotted Rollins, his burly frame diving for cover, and she charged, tackling him into a crate, her knee pinning his chest, her voice a snarl. "You're done. Mike, who's paying you?" He spat. "You're dead. Grant Tate's untouchable." But her cuffs snapped on, her team rounding up his crew, seizing laptops, ledgers, a burner phone with Tate's number. The evidence a noose for the councilman. But victory was fleeting. A mole had tipped Tate, and he was gone. His office empty, his phone offline, a ghost who'd slipped her grasp, and Olivia's triumph soured. Her team's haul drugs, cash, records a blow to Rollins, but not the head of the snake. Back at the precinct, the raid made headlines, X exploding with hashtag Grant strikes, but the mayor called, his voice a hiss. "You're making enemies. Olivia Tate's got friends in high places. Back off." And Olivia hung up, her jaw tight, because political pressure was a storm she'd weather, but the force's rebellion was a blade at her throat. Officers loyal to Rollins glaring, their radios silent, and Torres's report. "We've got the crew in custody." But Tate's lawyered up felt hollow, her deputy's eyes dodging Olivia's, a betrayal she couldn't prove but felt in her bones. The city burned, rioted spreading, a protester shot in a skirmish, the news blaming Grant's aggressive reforms, and Olivia's phone buzzed with another threat. Tate's just the start quit or bleed. Her hands shook, the ledger's details payments, dates, Tate's signature swimming in her mind, a map to a conspiracy she'd only scratched. And she realized the fight wasn't just for the force, but for the city's soul. Her mother's voice, "Never let them see you flinch," a fading echo against the weight of betrayal, loss, and a traitor she couldn't name. She stood, her badge gleaming, and ordered Torres to lock down the evidence, her voice a whip. "No one touches it. Maria, not you, not anyone." Because the mole was close. The city was breaking, and Olivia was alone. Her reforms a spark in a powder keg, her enemies circling, and her city a battlefield she'd either save or lose. The city was a live wire, its pulse jagged with the screams of protesters and the crackle of police radios, the air thick with tear gas and the weight of her reckoning. And Olivia Grant, chief of police, stood at the edge of a community center stage, her navy blazer a beacon in the packed auditorium, her badge gleaming under harsh lights as she faced a sea of faces angry, hopeful, desperate, her heart pounding with the fire of a woman who'd survived Chicago's mean streets and precinct conspiracies to lead this fractured force, but also with the dread that her reforms, her war on corruption, were splitting the city like a fault line. Because the raid on Sergeant Mike Rollins's drug warehouse had caged his crew but let Councilman Victor Tate slip free. And now, with riots scarring the streets and anonymous threats haunting her phone, Olivia knew this public forum wasn't just a chance to win the city, it was a crucible, a test of whether she could hold it together or watch it burn. The auditorium buzzed, residents clutching signs "Grant for Justice." Cops aren't kings while reporters live-streamed. X ablaze with Ask Chief Grant Forum, the viral courtroom video of her arresting Carl Dempsey still fueling the divide. And Olivia's ribs ached from his baton, her temples scarred from the rock at her press conference, reminders of a force that despised her, their old guard loyal to Rollins, their whispers of rebellion a constant hum, and the betrayal of her deputy. Maria Torres, whose hesitations had grown too sharp, a knife she couldn't ignore. The forum was her gambit, a plea to the people, and she stepped to the mic, her voice steady. "I'm Olivia Grant, your chief, and I'm here to listen. This department's failed you. Covered up crimes, protected dealers, but my reforms, body cams, public hearings. Firing the corrupt are for you. To rebuild trust, to make justice real. The crowd roared, some cheering, others jeering, a mother shouting about her son's death in custody, a man demanding Rollins's head, and Olivia leaned in, her eyes fierce. I've got evidence Rollins's crew took bribes from a drug network, backed by a city official, and I'm tearing it down. No matter who fights me, the words were a spark, the room erupting. But danger was a shadow. She spotted officers from Rollins's clique in the back, their uniforms crisp, their eyes cold. One clutching a radio, and her gut screamed setup. Because the city's riots weren't random, they were orchestrated, a tactic to discredit her. Her phone buzzed mid-speech. A text from an unknown number. You talk, resign tonight. Olivia's blood ran cold, her sister's shattered window in Atlanta flashing, the spray-painted traitor on her loft, threats that screamed inside job. And Torres, standing stage-side, avoided her glance, her loyalty a question mark that cut deeper than the crowd's shouts. The forum spiraled, a man in the crowd hurling a chair, glass shattering as windows broke, and Olivia saw Rollins's officers slip out, their radios crackling. Moments before a Molotov cocktail crashed through a side door, flames licking the walls, the auditorium descending into pandemonium, screams piercing the air as people fled, reporters diving for cover, and Olivia leapt from the stage, her pistol drawn, her voice a thunderclap. Everyone out now, her tactical team, loyal recruits she'd vetted, moved in, dousing the fire, guiding civilians. But outside, the riot exploded, Rollins's loyalists in uniform clashing with protesters, batons swinging, a squad car overturned, and Olivia, her blazer singed, waded into the chaos, her badge a shield as she tackled a rogue cop swinging at a teen, her knee pinning him, her voice roaring, "Stand down or you're done." The crowd froze, cameras capturing her silhouette against the flames, a black woman commanding a city on its knees. And the riot stalled, protesters cheering, officers hesitating, her presence a force that turned the tide. She radioed her team, ordering arrests of the instigators, her eyes locking on a Rollins ally. His radio dropped. Its channel opened to a voice she recognized, Tate's, his polished tone ordering, "Burn it down, make Grant fall." The revelation was a blade, Tate's plot to oust her now clear, his influence fueling the riots, the threats, the leaks. And Olivia seized the radio, her team cuffing the officer, her mind racing because Tate was no ghost, he was a kingpin. And she just caught his voice, a weapon to bury him. The forum ended in chaos, but Olivia's stand saving lives. Facing fire hit X like a tsunami. Grant saves trending. Clips of her stopping the riot going viral. The city's trust tilting toward her. Though the precinct's old guards seethed, their radios silent, their rebellion brewing. Back at headquarters, Torres reported, "We've got the radio, Chief, it's Tate, but he's lawyered up, untouchable for now." And Olivia's voice was ice, Trace's calls, Maria. "And watch your back, I'm done with leaks." Torres flinched, and Olivia felt the betrayal, the force splitting, the city teetering, her sister's safety a fading hope. The TV showed downtown smoldering, a protester's sign, Grant or nothing, a flicker of light. But a new threat pinged her phone. "You saved them tonight, but Tate's coming for you." Olivia stood, her badge heavy, her mother's voice, "Never let them see you flinch," a fading shield. Because Tate's plot was a noose, the traitor's shadow a blade, and her city was a battlefield she'd either win or lose, her reforms a spark in a city ready to explode. The precinct was a battleground of silence, its bullpen stripped of the old guard's swagger, the air heavy with the scent of coffee and fear as Olivia Grant stood in her office, her navy blazer a stark emblem of authority, her badge a blazing weight on her chest as she reviewed a sealed FBI dossier, her heart hammering with the resolve of a woman who'd clawed her way from Chicago's bullet-riddled streets to chief of police, but also with the dread that her crusade against corruption, against Sergeant Mike Rollins, Councilman Victor Tate, and their criminal web had pushed the city to the edge of collapse. Because the riots sparked by her public forum, the viral image of her standing against flames, had won the people's trust but also unleashed a backlash. And now, with the force fracturing and her sister's life in Atlanta under threat, Olivia knew this final purge wasn't just a mission, it was a reckoning, a fight for the soul of her city and her own survival. The dossier was a bombshell, detailing Tate's encrypted communications with a cartel broker, his signatures on Blue Haven LLC's drug payments, and wiretaps linking him to Rollins's crew. Evidence gathered after Olivia's raid and the radio capture of Tate's voice ordering the forum riot, and her collaboration with the FBI had turned the tide, their agents ready to strike. But Tate was a serpent, his mayoral campaign a shield, his allies in City Hall circling, and Olivia felt the noose tightening. Her deputy Maria Torres's evasions now a screaming betrayal, because the latest threat, a photo of her nephew's school, captioned "Last Warning." Grant had come from an internal server, a leak only someone close could manage. The city was a powder keg, X flooded with #Grant saves and #Cops fight back, protesters and police clashing nightly, a church torched in the chaos, and Olivia's reforms mandatory body cams. Public misconduct hearings, a civilian oversight board were law, but the police union had retaliated, filing a lawsuit claiming her reckless firings violated due process. Their lawyer, a Tate crony, painting her as a tyrant on CNN, and Olivia's blood boiled. Her mother's voice, "Never let them see you flinch," a fading anchor as she prepared for the endgame. She met FBI agent Carla Nguyen in a secure lot, the agent's eyes sharp. "Tate's at his campaign office tonight fundraiser. Low security, we move at 10 p.m. But he's got cops on payroll, so no leaks." Olivia nodded, her voice steel. "My team's clean vetted, loyal, but watch my deputy. Torres, she's slipping." Nguyen's glance was a mirror of her own doubt, and Olivia felt the isolation, her trust eroded by Torres's hesitations. The force's glares, the union's suit. Every step a minefield. The raid was surgical, Olivia leading her vetted squad alongside FBI agents, their vans storming Tate's office, flashbangs shattering the night, donors screaming as Tate, his silver hair glinting, bolted for a back exit. But Olivia was faster, her pistol drawn, her voice a roar. "Victor Tate, you're under arrest for racketeering, bribery, and conspiracy." He froze, his smirk venomous. "You're a dead woman? Grant the mayor won't let this stick." But her cuffs snapped on, her team seizing his laptop, files, a burner phone with cartel contacts. And Rollins's remaining loyalists, 3 officers caught in the raid, were cuffed, their radios silent, the conspiracy's heart ripped out. The precinct buzzed with the news, X erupting with #Grant takes down Tate, clips of Tate in cuffs trending. But victory was a mirage. The union's lawsuit gained traction, their lawyer demanding Olivia's resignation, and the mayor, cornered by Tate's arrest, called, his voice a snarl, "You've gone too far. Step back or I'll fire you." Olivia hung up, her jaw tight. But the real blow came at dawn, her sister called, sobbing. "They slashed my tires, left a note. Tell your sister to quit." Olivia's hands shook, her nephew's school photo burning in her mind. The threat a knife to her soul, because this wasn't just about Tate or Rollins, it was personal. A campaign to break her, in Torres's absence during the raid. Her vague "I was on another call" excuse was a betrayal Olivia couldn't ignore. She summoned Torres, her voice ice. "You knew about the school threat. Whose side are you on?" Maria Torres stammered. "I'm with you, Chief." But her eyes darted, and Olivia ordered her sidelined, her trust shattered. The force's rebellion, a fire she couldn't douse. The TV showed Tate's arraignment, his lawyer spinning lies. But the evidence, laptops, wiretaps, ledgers, was ironclad, and Olivia pushed forward, firing 10 more officers linked to Rollins, their badges stripped, her reform cemented, though the union's suit loomed, a legal noose, and the city's riots persisted. A protester's death fueling outrage. The news blaming Grant's divisive tactics. Her phone pinged with a final threat. Tate was the start, you're next. Olivia stood, her badge heavy, the dossier's pages cartel names, Tate's deals swimming in her mind. A conspiracy she'd cracked but not killed. Because the mayor's silence, Torres's lies, the union's war were a hydra, and her family's safety was a fading hope. She locked the dossier away, her mother's fire flickering. Because the purge was done, but the cost was her city's trust, her sister's fear, her own isolation. And Olivia knew the fight wasn't over, it was evolving. A battlefield she'd either conquer or die on. Her reforms, a spark in a city ready to ignite. The city exhaled, its streets no longer choked with tear gas or the roar of riots. But Olivia Grant stood in her precinct office, her navy blazer a quiet armor, her badge a heavy crown as she stared out at a skyline that felt both hers and foreign. Her heart a battlefield where the triumph of dismantling Councilman Victor Tate's corrupt empire clashed with the scars of her war, her sister's fear, her nephew's haunted eyes, the betrayal of Maria Torres because it is chief of police. She'd reshaped a broken force, but the cost was a solitude that echoed her Chicago youth, her Lagos-born mother's grave, her brother's blood in a gang war. And now, with the police union's lawsuit crumbling and her reforms cemented, Olivia faced a truth sharper than any threat victory didn't heal. It only carved deeper. The courtroom was a distant memory, Carl Dempsey's baton, a fading bruise. But its viral video had sparked her rise. In the FBI raid on Tate and his cuffs, his cartel-linked laptop had sealed his fate. His arraignment splashed across X. Grant takes down Tate trending for weeks, the city's cheers drowning out the old guard's snarls. Though the union's lawsuit, a desperate jab, had loomed like a storm, claiming her firings of Mike Rollins's crew violated protocol. Their lawyer, a Tate ally, painting her as a dictator on every news channel. But Olivia, fueled by her mother's mantra, never let them see you flinch, had fought back. Her evidence ledgers, wiretaps, Rollins's drug payments ironclad, and yesterday, the judge ruled in her favor, dismissing the suit, a gavel's bang that echoed like a gunshot, freeing her to finish what she'd started. The precinct was transformed, body cams universal, misconduct hearings live-streamed, a civilian oversight board active, 15 corrupt officers gone, their badges melted, the force leaner, cleaner, a model for cities nationwide. And Olivia's reforms had calmed the streets, protests fading, Jamal's mother sending a thank you note, a rare light in a year of darkness. But the cost was etched in her sister's voice, trembling over the phone. They're watching us, Liv. When does it stop? The slashed tires, the note at her nephew's school, the spray-painted traitor on her loft were wounds that bled, proof of a traitor she'd never caught. And Torres, sidelined after her evasions, had resigned, her departure a confession of guilt Olivia couldn't prove, leaving a void where trust should have been. The mayor, once a foe, now praised her on CNN, but his silence during Tate's reign stung, and Olivia felt the isolation. A black woman who'd rewritten the city's soul, yet stood alone, her office a fortress of files and ghosts, the TV looping her press conference, her voice, this is a new dawn now, a prophecy fulfilled. But hollow without her family's safety, her own peace. X was quieter. Had Grant saves fading, replaced by debates over her next move. And a new message pinged her phone. No sender ID. You broke Tate, but the cartel's watching, leave or they die. Her breath caught. The cartel a hydra, Tate's arrest a mere head. And the threat. Too precise, her sister's address again screamed of a leak, a shadow in the force she'd missed, and Olivia's hands shook, her mother's fire flickering. Because this wasn't just about reform, it was about survival, her nephew's future, her sister's life, and the choice she'd avoided: stay and fight, or run to protect them. She met FBI agent Carla Nguyen in a diner. The agent's voice low. The cartel's moving through a new broker, someone in City Hall. Maybe higher, we need you to stay. Lead the case. Olivia's eyes drifted to a photo in her wallet, her mother, smiling under a Lego sun, gone too soon, and her heart wavered. The chief who'd felled empires, now a sister, an aunt, a woman tired of blood. But Nguyen's words, "You're the only one they fear," were a mirror reflecting the truth. Olivia was the storm, the city her canvas, and quitting meant letting Tate's ghost win, letting corruption creep back. She stood, her badge heavy, and returned to the precinct, calling a briefing, her voice ringing. "We've cleaned the force, but a new threat's here: cartel money. New players, and I'm not done fighting." The officers, her officers, vetted, loyal nodded, their eyes fierce. A force reborn, but the threat lingered. The cartel's shadow a blade, and Olivia locked her office. Opening a safe, pulling a file, Nguyen had slipped her a name, a new official, a thread to pull, a fight to come. Her phone buzzed. Her sister, pleading, "Come to Atlanta. Live. Be with us." And Olivia's throat tightened. Her mother's smile a fading light, but she typed a reply. "I'm staying for you, for him, for the city." The precinct hummed, the city breathed, and Olivia, alone but unbroken, pinned the new file to her board, her badge gleaming, because the dawn was hers. But the war wasn't over. A cartel loomed, a traitor hid, and she'd face them. Not as a hero, but as a woman who'd chosen justice over peace. Her city's heart, her only home. She stepped into the bullpen, her officers saluting, the skyline a promise, and Olivia Grant, the chief who'd changed everything, walked into the fight, her mother's fire eternal, her resolve a flame that would never die. Out from a courtroom shock to a reformed force, her fight changed it all. Thanks for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more thrilling tales.